The Conquer Worry Show, episode number 13. Welcome to the Conquer Worry Show, the show dedicated to creating awareness of the resources that are available for those who struggle with worry, anxiety, or depression. If you are struggling now, if you've struggled in the past, or someone you love is struggling, this is the show for you. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Conquer Worry Show. In this episode, I'm going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you the story of Eileen Cronin. Eileen has overcome several major life obstacles. Any one of these obstacles and her ability to overcome them would be inspiring in themselves. But what we're going to do is talk about her life chronologically, what she's done to overcome these major hurdles, and how she's gotten to where she is today. Her story is the subject of a recent memoir that she released called Mermaid, a Memoir of Resilience. Now, this story was actually featured in Oprah's 10 Titles to Pick Up Now back in February. It was also on page 1 of Poets and Writers, and in April, it made another Oprah's list in the section of Memoirs Too Powerful to Put Down. But instead of our traditional interview format, I'm going to tell you the story and then play clips of Eileen telling you part of her story. So for our longtime listeners, this will be a different approach to telling stories, and please send us your feedback. Visit our website, conquerworry.org, and let us know what you think about how we present Eileen's story. This is the story of Eileen Cronin. And for this story, I'm going to begin with where she is today and then take you to where she came from. Today, Eileen is a psychologist with a PhD. She lives out in Los Angeles. She's a wife, a mother. She's a child of the 1960s, born in the middle of America, Cincinnati, Ohio. She was one of 11 children. In fact, she was the 7th. But from 1960 until today, Eileen has overcome a lot of obstacles. Now, each one of these obstacles would be crippling for almost anybody by themselves. But I tell you, Eileen talks about her childhood as being normal. She said she was a girl of the 60s and 70s with girlfriends, boyfriends, skinny dipping, smoking cigarettes, no different than anybody else. But as you'll learn, it was different. The first thing she had to overcome was a challenging relationship with her father. Let's let Eileen explain.
There were 11 kids in our family, so it was hard to get time with my dad. He was really busy. He ran his own business, which was a car dealership, and he, was running the business, so he worked a lot, and when he wasn't working, he was pretty exhausted. It's pretty, sort of one of those jobs where you probably are constantly worrying about the economy if you're running a car dealership. And he was successful, but he was stressed out.
Okay, so I know what you're thinking at this point in the story. Jay, what's so hard about that? Hundreds of millions of young girls deal with that. But then her father decided to up and leave the family.
Unfortunately, it was not good timing for me because I was a senior in high school that year. So it kind of, there was a lot of sense of instability because at that point my mom had been in the hospital twice already for 3 months with shock treatments and all of that.
Yes, you heard that correctly. Her mom had been in and out of the hospital and had even participated in some electroshock therapy just to add to her troubles.
My dad left And my mom went, she became manic pretty quickly. I'd say it took about a week. And then she ended up back in the hospital.
So by no means is Eileen the first young woman to have her father leave the family or mother go into a mental institution, but having both happen around the same time can obviously lead to some real mental struggles for a young person, and that led to a suicide attempt by Eileen after a party one night. Here's her telling the story.
I just felt like I was trapped somehow. That's how it felt to me, like I was trapped into this life of being abandoned constantly. And so I ended up just coming home from that party intoxicated, and I remember I really did want to die because I was talking to my best friend and my closest brother down in the basement. We had one of those renovated basements from the 70s where you always hung out as a kid. And I went upstairs. Everyone else was in bed after they left, or my friend left. My brother went to bed, and I started just combing the medicine cabinets for something to kill myself with, and I found something. I still don't know what I found, but I took a number of these pills and went to bed, and that night I felt pretty happy. I was glad, relieved, really, to be over with the pain. But luckily, I didn't die.
Since Eileen had attempted suicide at a young age and later went on to earn a PhD in psychology, I really feel that she's uniquely qualified to speak to what a young girl should think about if she is considering suicide. And here's what she had to say.
All I can say is that I really did want to die, and I'm very glad that I didn't die. That's all I can say. I don't know that anyone could want to die more than I did at that moment. And if I had, nothing would have happened and eventually happened for me. So, people can't really talk you out of being depressed or talk you out of being suicidal, but you probably should know if you're feeling suicidal that you're sort of experiencing life at its worst moment, if you're thinking about suicide. And it's just possible that life has all kinds of moments to offer you. And if you think about it, it probably already has had all kinds of moments to offer. And so there's always this possibility that it could get a lot better. So that's what you would be giving up if you killed yourself.
So Eileen eventually recovers from that incident, gets to college, and then runs across another major life struggle. And this involves her brother, Frankie.
Of the 11 siblings, Frankie and he was my closest sibling. He was 1 year older than me, and very different personality than mine. I was a bit of a go-getter, even at a young age. I kind of just was. And Frankie was quiet. People came to him. Everyone loved him. But he got killed in a car accident. I was a junior, and I was starting my junior year, and I came home, found out that Stevie had died the night before in a car accident. His friend and he had been drinking, and his friend didn't know our neighborhood so well because we had moved at that point about a year earlier, and I think something happened on the exit ramp on the freeway, and they ran into a telephone pole, and so he died instantly, I hope.
Okay, So if you've made it this far in the story, you know that she has a father who was in and out of their life, a mother who struggled with very severe mental health issues. She attempted suicide in high school, got past it, went to college, and then her closest sibling of 11 passed away. But that's not the end of the story. Really, that's the end of the story, because all of these struggles really have to be looked through a different lens. You see, her mom had exposure to a certain drug, and, well, let me let her tell you the story.
Well, this was in 1960, and they did not know about drugs in those days having any impact on the developing fetus. And this particular drug, which is called thalidomide, was given to mothers or pregnant women in particular. They said for morning sickness, to stop a miscarriage, for insomnia. Essentially what it comes down to is that really in the 50s and 60s, there was it was sort of a heyday for sedative drugs in the United States for women.
Thalidomide is a nasty drug. According to some reports, a total of 10,000 babies in Europe and Africa alone were born with physical deformities and brain damage as a result of this drug. And in fact, Dr. Martin Johnson, director of the Thalidomide Trust, suggests that it's possible this drug was actually created by the Nazis during World War II. And some of the scientists that were involved in the development of the drug for the Nazis went on to work for a German drug company that later released this untested drug. And in fact, there are allegedly several untested drugs that were on the marketplace back then that ended up having severe ramifications for expectant mothers.
They even made a cocktail back in the 50s. There was a drug called Milltown. That was one of the first ones. And they would put it in a martini, and they called it a Miltini.
A Miltini. Sounds harmless. Shoot, it almost sounds fun. But listen to Eileen explain what the culture was like back then for people who were struggling with anxiety and looking for some potential resources.
Where I found out that the drug was very commonly used in the United States. Not commonly. I should say it was being given out by a number of doctors as a pretrial drug. Back then, they did not have studies that required you to go through all kinds of layers. I don't know if you remember, but back when drugs for people who were HIV positive, they couldn't get drugs because of the difficulty, the laws and regulations about releasing drugs that haven't been tested. Now, because, that's how things work. They just don't give them out if they're not tested. But back then, that was how they tested them. They just gave them out. And then, if there weren't any bad side effects, it was probably okay. That was how they did things in the 60s. But it was because of the thalidomide that they changed those rules. And unfortunately, it was actually marketed to pregnant women, so that made the situation even worse.
Eileen's mother claims that on a flight from the United States to Germany, while she was pregnant with Eileen, she was suffering an anxiety attack, and a stewardess aboard the airline gave her a pill, and she took it. The ramifications for Eileen were clear and life-changing.
I was born without legs from the below the knee, around the knee. I have one knee, and I don't have another knee. And then I have a not slightly, I'd say reasonably misshapen hand. It is It has 4 fingers now, but it used to have 3. I had a lot of plastic surgery on that as a kid.
A father in and out of her life. A mother in and out of mental hospitals. A brother who dies. A failed suicide attempt. And all without the use of legs. Today, Eileen is a successful writer. She's a PhD psychologist, mother, and wife. She's an inspiration to anybody who is struggling. And if you are struggling today, or if you know somebody in your life that could benefit from hearing her story, forward this podcast and buy them a copy of her book. It's called Mermaid, a Memoir of Resilience. I could not do this story the justice that it deserves without asking Eileen to explain how she manages to get through, how she managed to overcome all of these struggles.
I think there's something in all of us that just tells us to keep going on, just keep pushing on. And a lot of times I didn't know whether things were going to get better. There were many times that I thought they will never get better. And believe me, some things lasted for many years. I would say, I had this terrible spell when I was 17, and then it got better because I made friends in college, and then I met the medical student, and then it was wonderful, and I was getting great grades, and I was going somewhere, and then my brother died, and I kind of went back down the tubes, and then, but I kept focusing on school. Broke up with the boyfriend, even though that was a dumb idea. He was a great boyfriend, but I did it because I just couldn't think straight. And I kind of moved on and focused on me. So it was a good thing in the end that I broke up with the boyfriend. I shouldn't have gotten married at 22 or whatever if that had been what happened. And things kind of always worked out if you just kind of keep plugging along. But there is no guarantee that it's going to happen tomorrow, next week, even a year from now, that it will get better. It just tends to get slightly better every day if you're doing what you're supposed to do to get what you want.
I want to thank Eileen for coming on the show. I think it makes for a great story of resilience and hope. Please pick up your copy of Mermaid, a Memoir of Resilience. It can be found on Amazon.com. We'll have links to it in the show notes for this episode at conquerworry.org. And please, if you're struggling, seek help. After you've sought that help, please work hard and live in relentless pursuit of your life's purpose.